Well, welcome everybody. We're delighted that you came this morning. We hope by the time you leave, you're still delighted that you came. We want to introduce you to a friend of ours. This is Tim Chasuli, who is the former president and CEO of Planet Honda in Union, New Jersey. This guy is a certifiable nutcase. He's a lawyer, I call him a Zen lawyer turned car dealer, who is literally shattering the traditional car dealership paradigm. One of the most innovative guys that Jackie and I know, one of the most creative people we've ever met. He defines himself as an entertainer who puts on a show designed to make car buying an awful lot of fun. Now, I don't know about you all. I guess I'm a typical guy, right? I like cars. And the thought of buying a new car, I don't know how that is for you, but for me, that's pretty, you know, I kind of like that idea. The thought of going through the process of buying that new car, I don't know about you, man, I'd rather have the root canal. Why? Because when we step onto most car dealership lots, at least in this country, somebody in here tell me what happens. You get stalked, you get mobbed, right? 3 people try to squeeze themselves out the same door, right? Nonchalantly, like they're trying to be cool, and come descend on you, right? Not at Planet Honda. At Planet Honda, you walk across the lot all by yourself, nobody bothers you, you walk through a glass door, and the other end is an attractive receptionist who says, "Oh, we're so glad you chose to come visit us today. What can we do for you?" And the defensive posture of the customer says, "I'm just," which is code for, back off and leave me alone. So what do they do at Planet Honda? They just sort of honor the customer's wishes, but they do it in an innovative, creative, and kind of a sarcastic way. They slap a yellow badge on you which says JL, which stands for just looking and signals to the salespeople, right? Back off and leave them alone. So, you know, let's say I'm in the dealership and I come up and, what's your name? Raina. Raina? Raina's the salesperson, right? I'm ready to talk. I'm ready to have a conversation with the salesperson. I probably already know the answer to my question because I've done the research on the internet. But Raina, I'm ready to talk to you. And I come up and I say, "Raina, can you tell me about the coefficient of drag on that new Honda Accord?" Raina's going to look at me and say, "You know what? I'd love to tell you about the car's been a beautiful car for 20 years, but the new features and benefits are just sweet. But we have a problem. And the problem is you're wearing that badge. And as long as you're wearing that badge, I'm not supposed to talk to you because if I talk to you, my sales manager's going to think I'm trying to sell you something, and we have a policy against that here at Planet Honda." You get the sarcasm of this? But Kevin, if you want to take that badge off, we can talk about all the cool benefits on that new Accord. Badge comes off. Men and women, what just happened? Psychological transition just took place, right? Who feels like they're empowered? The customer. Who feels like they're setting the agenda? The customer. Who feels like they're in control? The customer. What do we usually feel like when we go into a car dealership? Out of control, right? Can you imagine a dealership that speaks 15 different languages? Why? Union, New Jersey is the melting pot of ethnicity, and they want everybody that comes into the dealership to feel comfortable talking about a car. Ladies, can you imagine a dealership that has a WOW program? You say, what's WOW? Women on Wheels. It's a seminar program. Want to learn how to change a flat tire on a busy freeway and not get killed? Want to learn how not to get ripped off by a dealer? Want to learn how to extend the life of your car? Join the seminar program, Women on Wheels. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking. Some of you are saying, sounds a little bit sexist to me. I'm not so sure about that. I think he's done his homework. You know what the homework says? 85% of the household decisions in the United States of America, including buying a car, are made by whom? Women. There is a market today that is larger than the market of India and China combined. Would you like to know the name of the market? Women. Women. Now, I'm not going to say any more about that at this. Jackie does a phenomenal program on the whole trends underneath the she economy. And it's fascinating because it's a $22 billion opportunity. And what the research shows is she often feels ignored by it. I think he gets it. Can you imagine a dealership that says, you know, you want your car serviced? Bring it in on Wednesday night. We'll fix it through the night and give it back to you first thing on Thursday morning so you don't have to be inconvenienced. And oh, by the way, if we don't fix it right the first time for you, we'll fix it right the second time and you owe us absolutely nothing. Now, I could go on about the ways that this guy has innovated to decommoditize his business. But let me cut to the sort of the grand crescendo. They don't underestimate the fact that when you and I fork out 40 grand for a new car, taking delivery of that new car for most of us is a pretty big deal, right? And you're on the planet, right? Planet Honda, and you got to get off the planet. How's that going to happen? Well, before they give you your new car, they usher you into this. It's a space simulator. It seats 6. It turns a half a G-force like a Disney ride, and it's got a big screen in it. And so you sit out in this thing with your family or your spouse or whoever, right? And you go for the 6-minute ride. And up on the screen comes Chisuli, who says nothing to you about the product you just bought. He talks to you about the fact that he's a green dealership. He talks to you about the investment that he's making in the local school system. And he talks to you about the 2 goals that he has for his dealership, which are employees for life, which nobody thinks is possible, and customers for life, and how he thinks that will impact the relationship he wants to build with you. Now think about that. If you have any buyer's remorse, if you have any question in your mind, you walk out of this thing and you start to feel like, you know what, I've just started a relationship with a pretty cool company. If you think this dude is a candidate for the nut house, let me give you the statistics. He used to spend $450 per brand new car in advertising. Now he spends a third of that. In an industry that turns its sales force over an average of 3 times a year, his turnover is less than 1%. 38,000 repair visits come out of these service bays every year. He has to make good on this service guarantee, less than 0.5%. 6,000 brand new Hondas sold out of this dealership on average each year. 70% of those sales come from repeat or referral business. Are you ready for the clincher? Buy a new car from Planet Honda, and you are going to spend, on average, $500 more than if you bought it on the internet or you bought it from the dealer down the street. What's that telling us? Radically differentiate your business through innovation. Decommoditize it, and you don't have to give it away. What's the lesson we should all be pulling from this story? It seems to me that one of the lessons is innovate or perish. 6 years ago, we had 16,000 dealerships in the United States of America. Now we're hovering somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000. Innovate or perish. Look, somebody somewhere right now is building a product, a service, a business model, a new process that is designed to kick your butt. If it's you, then you get to establish the rules by which your competitors must play the game. If it's not you, then you better get comfortable playing by the rules created by somebody else. Let me just ask you this morning, what would happen if someone in your space, I don't care if you're in the nonprofit world, the government world, the private sector, what would happen if somebody in your space built a service, a product, a business model that radically outperformed yours and cost half as much? Because I'll guarantee you right now, somebody in your space that you don't even know about is starting a revolution that's going to amaze your customers and disrupt your industry. Our question this morning is, why can't it be you? And that's what we'd like to discuss and weave in your questions to that as we go.
So, we decided we were going to step out of our comfort zone and get uncomfortable. And what we did is we decided we were going to innovate. So Christina was kind enough to let us experiment a little bit with all of you. How do you like that? Feel good already? So far? Well, 10% of you experimented with us, and we thank you for that. What we decided to do is not create a program that we're comfortable with and we know really well and take all of our key points and just share what we think you need to create a culture of innovation, to lead a culture of innovation. So as many of you know, we asked you to send us your questions. What are your biggest challenges on leading, crafting, creating, coaching, mentoring a culture of innovation in your own corner circle of influence? And many of you sent us questions, so we thank you for that. So I'm not sure Kevin thanks you for that, because we looked at those questions and we tried to synthesize those questions and we tried to organize those questions, and then we fit them into at least what we thought were some answers, solutions, ideas, suggestions. So that's what we have for you. This is a program that is, in fact, designed by you for you. I hope it works, because in our minds, this is an appetizer for the big meal that happens in first quarter of 2013, because what we hope is if this works, then we'd like to do it again in January. But really today, with 1 hour, we have enough time to scratch the surface, and that's about it. What we'd like to do in January is really get you all of your questions, not just 10% of your questions, but all of your questions, and then really kind of analyze them and group them and synthesize them, and then truly craft a half-day event for you and for your colleagues as well. Let's make it even bigger than this. So, are you taking notes, some of you? We have our slides available. You just have to go to our website, /slides. The event code is all lowercase. That's what always gives people a hiccup. If, though, you have trouble downloading our slides, I want to introduce you to someone who is the Freibergs queen of everything, and that is Patty Cipro. She is the woman who runs our office, so if by any chance you have struggles with downloading the slides or you need anything in the future from the Freibergs, Patty is absolutely there to assist you. And then, if you are online right now, real time, feel free to tweet about what goes on this morning, especially if something strikes you as valuable and important. In LinkedIn, both Kevin and I are LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with us there as well. We'd like to continue the conversation. In the spirit of it being designed by you and for you, we are going to kick off each of our key points with your questions. So, here is the very first question that came from the 10% of you. So the question that will be directed to Kevin is this question: how do you handle creative ideas that look good but won't work? I mean, you just know in your gut, you know, you have this sense that it's just not going to fly, it's not going to happen. So how do you handle that without squelching or without killing the spirit or the creativity of the people who offered up those ideas?
And I think one of the things that all of us want to do, I hope you want to do this, is you ought to be in the business of creating an idea factory, right, inside your companies. Because one of the things that we know is that if you look at the most innovative companies in the world and say, what drives innovation? Well, certainly high on the list, maybe number one in most cases, is ideas from employees, right? So you want to build an idea factory. But I think the question sort of begged the question of, how do you do that when the ideas may not be right and not shut down that pipeline of ideas? This is the one slide that you're not going to get on our deck because I just created it late last night, and so Patty will get it to you if you want it. But I think one of the things that you have to do is you have to have a little bit of objectivity in terms of a process and a criteria for evaluating ideas. If you're going to tell me yes or you're going to tell me no, at least let's have that based in some sense of an objective process. And this is the most crowded slide we're going to show you today, so I apologize for that already. But I think the question is your idea real? Is there a real market for it? And the thing I want to draw your attention to is, does it elegantly solve a problem that matters? Two key words there, three key words: elegantly and problem that matters. A lot of people will come to us with ideas that are sort of half-baked, not real well thought out. And that's how innovation is. Innovation is messy, right? But if you think about elegance, elegance drives us beyond the first, easiest, most obvious answer to the more difficult answer that's hard to replicate and radically differentiates us from our competition, right? The easy answer for Steve Jobs would have been more data on a disk and a disk that goes faster. The elegant answer was what? Let's get rid of the disk altogether. And oh, by the way, let's create a whole ecosystem around that device called iTunes, which is the real innovation of Apple. And then does the problem matter? It may be a great idea, but are we really solving a problem that's going to put a dent in the universe? Is the product or service or process or the business model real? Do we have the competence and the resources to do it? Right? Will it truly improve, if it's a process innovation, lives of our internal customers? Will it truly improve the lives of our external customers? Can we win? At the end of the day, if we implement what you want to do, can we win? Will it make us more competitive as a company? Will it make our business processes internally more efficient, lower cost, cut cycle time? Does it radically differentiate us? Is there anybody else out there doing it? How well are they doing it? If you think it radically differentiates, prove it. How well do you think it's really going to set us apart from the competition? And if it does, can we sustain that competitive advantage over time? And then, of course, the big one. Do we have the talent to pull it off? Do we have a strong leader on the team that can rally critical collaborators, that can cross boundaries, that can get other key players involved in making this happen? Do we have commitment from on top? Do we have people that know how to execute? And then finally, at the end of the day, is it worth doing? Is the risk acceptable? Is there a return on your idea? Is there a return on innovation? And even if there is a return on innovation, what have we done to mitigate risks? And can we live with worst-case scenario? And then finally, does it support our reason for being? Is it consistent with the strategic initiatives that we have slated? Is it consistent with the vision and the values and the culture? Now, I'm not telling you this is the silver bullet. All I'm suggesting is that this is a fairly simple criteria to go through when somebody comes to you with an idea and say, well, let's run it through the grid here, and let's see. And I think it makes it easier for you to say, you know what, I think you have the embryonic phases of a great idea, but we're missing the boat in some areas here. We've got to go back and whittle on it some more to make it more elegant. I think that's a way to say no, at least no for now, and still keep people engaged in the game. If it's just no because I don't think it works, then you and I have an argument. We have a disagreement, and you go away. And what happens in in mediocre companies is ideas fall into a black hole, right? We don't really know why they didn't work. We don't really know why they got stopgapped somewhere. This gives you, I think, a process to begin to mitigate that. All right, a second question that came up, and this is a really this is a tough one, I think. It came from, obviously, a government employee who said, how do you get government employees impassioned and firing on all cylinders in an environment that, the whole compensation structure is different, and in an environment that's traditionally pretty resistant to change?
Well, we think innovation, regardless of the environment that you're operating in, requires that you get comfortable being uncomfortable. And the very best example that we have of being comfortable, being uncomfortable is this. Innovation requires us to risk. And when we're really, really comfortable, the likelihood of us risking is not all that high. So when we are uncomfortable, that's oftentimes when we're most alert. When the blinders are lifted, that is when and where oftentimes we can see opportunity in what look like status quo, standard operating procedures. We also have to be super careful that we are looking at the right problem. Let me share an example of being comfortable in a very uncomfortable place. So British Railways was failing miserably. The business was not going anywhere. It was going down, if anything. And so what Peter Parker and his team of very powerful executives thought is they thought, We need branding. We need marketing. We need advertising. So you know what they did? They went to a variety of really high-power advertising firms and said, give us a proposal, give us a bid on how you can help us revamp our business. They went to Alan Brady Marsh. And as Peter Parker and his team of very powerful executives walked through the reception area at Alan Brady Marsh's headquarters in London, what they witnessed is a woman behind a reception desk who was on the phone, and she was doing her nails. She didn't even look up to acknowledge them. They sat down, and when she was finally finished, she looked up and she said, "Can I help you?" And they said, "We're here for a meeting. We're British Railways." And she said, "Okay, someone will be with you soon." And they waited. And then finally, a young, kind of unkempt, not very professional-looking young woman comes down and walks through the doors and says, "Are you the British Railway people?" "Yeah, we are. Follow me." She escorts them down a series of hallways, up a stairwell, to a conference room that had literally just been used. The chairs were all in disarray. There was coffee that wasn't all, it was still in cups. There were biscuits that were still half-eaten. And they sat down. And she said, "Just hold on, someone will be here shortly." And they waited. And as they waited, different associates peeked into the conference room, and they didn't say anything. They just looked around and they left. Peter Parker and his team were infuriated. Finally, one of the guys says, "Hey, listen, we got to get the heck out of here. This is ridiculous. We are a potential customer of theirs, and this just isn't right. Let's get out of here." So they start to collect their belongings, and as they just get ready to leave, Peter Marsh, the senior guy at Alan Brady Marsh, busts through the conference room doors, and he says, "Hold on a minute. Before you leave, I want to formally apologize to all of you." He said, "What I need you to know is that Alan Brady Marsh, we don't typically treat people like you have been treated here this morning. You see, we staged this event just for you, because we wanted you to know how the customers at British Railway have been treated for years." Uncomfortable. You could hear a pin drop in the room. And then Peter Marsh went on to say, "See, your problem isn't advertising, it's not branding, it's not marketing. Your problem is employee engagement, apathy. You have people in your organization who have quit, as Ken Blanchard loves to say, but stayed." Your problem is engagement. Was it uncomfortable for the British Railway team to hear what they heard? You bet. But the blinders were lifted, and they were open to that feedback that literally took their business in a brand new upward direction. Was it uncomfortable for the Alan Brady Marsh to do what they did and literally lose one of the biggest deals they could have had? Yeah. But in that uncomfortable place, there was a lot of learning and a lot of discovery that happened. See, people will not bring you their ideas if they are not engaged. A lot of people love to say that their most valuable assets are their people. Kevin and I would say that's not right anymore. It's just not true. Your most valuable ideas in a business culture that is obsessed with innovation, your most valuable assets are ideas. And if your people have quit but stayed, or we like to say, if you have a lot of these people, dead people working, wandering the walls and halls of your business, see, dead people working show up, they're physically present, but they're psychologically, they're emotionally, and they're intellectually checked out. Dead people working will not bring you the kinds of ideas that are going to lead to innovation, that are going to lead to opportunity, that are going to lead to real honest, vulnerable, authentic feedback that allows you to lift off the blinders and change your way. We have to figure this out first and see, we are a culture right now. We're a culture that has more addiction, more overweight, more debt, we are more medicated than we have ever been in our history. We're numbing ourselves. Silly. We're numbing ourselves, you know why? Primarily because we're not connected. We so want to be connected. People are like this because there's no opportunity to connect internally. And that's not how we were designed to be. In our hearts and in our souls and in our spirits, we have gifts, we have talents, we have dreams, we have desires, we have goals. And you know what? We so want to use those, share those, invest those at work because we spend so much of our life at work. And when we don't get the chance to do that, we check out. And then we numb. And then we go to bed and we don't get refreshed and we don't get replenished. And then we come back to work and we go through the same motions, the same grind all over again. What are you doing to reconnect with people in your organizations? That's what they want. People will not bring their ideas unless they feel safe, unless they feel inspired, unless they feel challenged, unless they feel valued to do so. What contribution are you making to creating a little circle, a little pocket within your own department, within your own organization to draw the best out of people? To ask them about their insights, to ask them about their ideas, to ask them about their family, to ask them about their health, so that they will be inspired to step out of that place and into a place where they are far more engaged, alive, and on fire. That's what we need. Okay.
Jackie is teeing up this next question. I think people also want to be connected to a noble, larger, heroic cause. I mean, I don't think any of you in this room, I certainly don't, you know, I don't put my head on the pillow at night and go, boy, I can't wait to get up in the morning and go screw up the company. I can't wait to go to work tomorrow and be bored. You know, we all want to lay our head on the pillow at the end of the day, don't we, and say, we moved the needle. We're working on something that's significant. We're a business that's about changing the world. And I don't care where you are, really. I don't care if you're in the deepest recesses of one of our government bureaucracies. You know, you may not change the Secretary of Interior, but you can change your little department by helping them say, what's the cause for which we fight? And how do we rally together and marshal all of the talents, the diversity of talents that we have in this department to go do something heroic? At the end of the day, whose life is it? It's your life, right? You can go to bed at the end of the day and say, well, they wouldn't let me. You know, the secretary of blah, 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 the commissioner of blah, blah, blah wouldn't let us do it. Well, great, that's nice. What are you going to do? Sit your grandchildren on your knee 20 years from now and say, God, I had great talents, could have done some great things. I had a great team, but they wouldn't let us. Oh, that's a big turn on. Maybe we need to take ownership of our little corner of the world, like Jackie said, and connect people to a larger cause.
Spin out of passionate projects. You know, you will gain more return on your investment if you create in your own departments what we like to call pockets of innovation. It doesn't have to be an organization of innovation just yet, but what if? What if you engaged your team and said, let's create a little POI, a little pocket of innovation for all to see? Okay, so the next question that we got from many of you is this. How do you motivate change in a very large, well-established company where people tend to be comfortable or risk adverse? What change models are most companies using?
I don't think we have an answer for what change model most companies are using. There are a lot of great models out there. If you haven't explored them, go visit John Cotter's model. It's probably one of the most simple, elegant models for change if you want to process for change. We're not going to give you one this morning. I think he's done a better job than we ever could have dreamed of, so why reinvent the wheel? But what I am going to tell you is that I think all of us have got to create a culture, a spirit where people understand how important it is to be hungry for change. Now I want you to think about this for just a minute. Think about the last time you were really hungry for something. Whether it was food, sex, something. I don't know. When you're hungry, man, you're focused. When you're hungry, you're preoccupied. When you're hungry, you're determined, you're ambitious. When you're hungry, you're flexible, right? In the sense of food, you're willing to try things that you normally wouldn't try, right, to satisfy that hunger. And in the process of that flexibility, you often find new opportunities, right, new experiences. What if we could create a culture, a critical mass of people that thought like that? Here's the thing that I can give you a money-back guarantee on in this room. I don't care what part of the world you reside in, your organization and you in the next 24 months are going to change. That's not the question. The question is, are the changes that you evoke going to be opportunity-driven, opportunity-led, or crisis-driven? You're going to change. The market's going to demand it of you. I don't care if you're in a nonprofit today and you're competing for donors' dollars. Right? You're going to have to shake it up to show why I should invest in your charity versus somebody else's, right? The market's going to demand this of you. The question is, are those changes going to be opportunity-led or crisis-driven? And I think one of the ways that we help people get on board with the change that accompanies innovation is even to look at some negative examples. Now look, I got to just tell you, every book we've ever written has been positive stories. We're not kiss and tell people. We don't like to go in and dig up dirt. We think we learn from the positive stories. But I will tell you that there are some stories that we ought to be paying attention to, and we ought to be telling each other, and we ought to be telling our people if we want to help create a culture that's hungry for change. And one of those stories is right here. Most of you know Kodak as a world-class innovator. In fact, Kodak was one of the most innovative companies of its time. You should think of Kodak as the Google or Apple or Amazon of its day, right? At one point in time, Kodak enjoyed 96% of the US film market. As recent as the mid-90s, it still enjoyed 76% of that market. Kodak was the dominant player. Kodak was the incumbent, the big dog on the hill. Today, Kodak is bankrupt. What happened? What didn't they pick up on? What lessons didn't Kodak learn? Well, it's easy to pick on them in hindsight, right? Because I started by saying, world-class innovator, world-class company. But to understand Kodak, I think you have to understand their business model. Their business model was basically to sell you a very inexpensive camera and then make money on the film. Lots of it. But let me ask you a question here this morning. How many of you, by a show of hands, just love going out and paying $13.99 for an album just to get to your one favorite song? How many are willing to do that? How many of you, Patty, would be willing to do that? How many of you are willing to go out and buy an entire encyclopedia of CDs for your kid just to get them through one research paper? Not very many of you. You see, that was the problem that Kodak faced. Its customers' mentality changed. They turned a corner. They were no longer willing to pay for 24 or 36 exposures just to get a couple of good photos. And what that tells us is that even the most loyal customers, your most loyal customers, will dump their beloved brands for an opportunity to enhance their experience, for an opportunity to increase their autonomy, for an opportunity to create more convenience. We're living in a world today, men and women, where loyalty is moving away from companies that tell us how to think and what to buy, to companies that are empowering us with the tools and the technology to think and act for ourselves. I would submit to you that this is why Apple is the most valuable company on the face of the earth today. So in a world where digital replaces film and smartphones replace cameras, Kodak couldn't make the shift. They got stuck in what Jackie and I call the incumbents mentality. I think they stopped being hungry for change. Why? When you're the big dog on the hill, you got a lot to protect, right? When you got a lot to protect, you start to draw in. You forget what brought you to the dance in the first place, which is radical risk-taking and radical innovation. Now, I need to tell you, Kodak had a history of doing great things, but it also had a history of rejecting some pretty world-class ideas. Edwin Land came up with a process for in-camera film processing. He took it to Kodak. They weren't interested. He called it Polaroid. Chester Carlson came up with a process for copying documents. He took it to Kodak. They weren't interested. He called it Xerox. Dave Glocker worked for Kodak, came up with a high-performance film coating and surface treatment to be used in biomedical and industrial applications, things like coating drill bits and coating stents that surgeons use to, neurostents and cardiovascular stents. Took it to his managers at Kodak, said, I think there's a multi-million-dollar business to be developed here. They weren't interested. He said, okay, can I get a non-compete and get waivers on the non-compete and go out and build my own? Today he runs his own company, Isoflux. And then there's Steve Sasson. Steve Sasson and his team in 1975 developed the first digital camera. Guess who they worked for? Guess what Kodak said? In all fairness, they were interested. They just didn't know how to leverage the technology. Think about this for a minute. When you got 76% of the market and you're making 70% margins on your core product, you look at a crew like this as a bunch of renegades and lunatics out on the fringe that threaten to cannibalize your core market. I mean, can you imagine Steve being in one of those, highfalutin product review meetings with all the powerful film people? Now let's see, Steve. What you're telling us is you want us to invest in a market, millions of dollars in a market that may or may not exist, a market that's considerably smaller than the market we currently own. And you want us to develop a product that customers may or may not want, using a business model that's going to yield much smaller margins than the margins we're getting on our core product. Tell me again why it is we should make this investment? You see, the film guys got caught in what Jackie and I call the tyranny of the or. Right? You can have it this way or you can have it that way, but you can't have it both ways. Right? The tyranny of the or looks like this. You can have peanut butter or you can have chocolate, but you can't have both. And then Reese's came along, embraced the genius of the and gave us both. Tyranny of the or says you can develop films that entertain kids or you can entertain adults, but you can't do both. And then Disney and Pixar came along, embraced the genius of the and gave us both. You see, for the innovator, either or represents a huge opportunity. It represents white space in which you can create new, fresh products to be commercialized. For the film guys at Kodak, it represented a threat. Because they couldn't get out of the either-or mindset. They couldn't get out of that place that said you want digital, but you also want to be able to print your most beloved photos. What's the lesson here for those of us that want to create cultures of innovation? I think one of the lessons is we got to learn as much from the mistakes of others so we don't repeat history as we do, these world-class innovators like Apple that most of us feel like we can't reach up to and touch. You're going to change. The question is it going to be opportunity-led or is it going to be crisis-driven? And I think it's a question we should ask everybody on our team. Because if it ends up being crisis-driven, then you are in a catch-up mode. And if you're in a catch-up mode, that threatens job security, it threatens health benefits, it threatens bonuses, it threatens your very survival. And we started by saying people want to be connected. I think at the end of the day, people want to come to work and make a difference. Maybe we should take a couple of questions.
Okay.
Any thoughts about what's been said so far? Yeah, please.
You reminded me about Kodak. It harkened back an idea about Sony. Sony had the technology to invent something like the iPod, but they were afraid to cannibalize their own product that was in the market, and look what's happened to Sony.
That's right. And conversely, one of the things, easy to say in hindsight, right? But if you look at the magic of Steve Jobs, there's lots of things that could be said about Steve Jobs and should be said about Steve Jobs. But one of the things that hasn't been said all that often, I don't think, is Steve had the ability to let go. To let go of yesterday's innovation and even cannibalize yesterday's innovation for something new and better. You know why? Because for him, it wasn't about the security of building a business, it was about changing the world. And the business case happened to be the byproduct that came along with it.
Wouldn't Kodak have benefited more if they controlled their own cannibalization? So they're afraid to cannibalize their own product, but if they knew anything about business, they know change is inevitable. The product is going to become obsolete. So why not just do it on their own terms then? It gives them more power, puts them in a better position than to let the market do it and then go bankrupt.
I don't know if all of you could have heard him, but he said, why didn't they just manage their own cannibalization, right? Better to do it than to have it done to you, if I summarize your question. I think that's right on, which begs the question, what if every one of us in the room took, in our case, a speech, a book, in your case, a product, a service, a process, and made it mandatory obsolete in 5 years? What would happen to our culture? I know that's not realistic, but what if that was the mentality? Planned obsolescence. Would it make us more creative? Would it make us more innovative? Would it make us more open to change? I think it would. Let's take one more question if you have it. I want to make sure that those of you that weren't in the 10% get a chance to play here.
We still have more questions, by the way, too.
Real loud, please.
I'm curious, did Alan Brady Marsh win the account stack?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yep.
And they helped British Railways take their engagement levels to better places. They're doing quite well now.
Okay, so another question that came up was that innovation often seems to be synonymous with the, the young generation, the risk takers. You hear about all these companies coming out of the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, and the question is it really just relegated for the young? And how do we cultivate an innovation, a culture of innovation with a multi-generational workforce? How do we create a culture that gets everybody plugged in and inspired to innovate?
It's pretty fascinating because if you look at the research that's been done or is being done on innovation, McKinsey did a global survey and asked executives, is innovation critical to your success in the future? Absolutely. And then they went on to say, well, what drives innovation? And they came up with a number of drivers of innovation. But what was fascinating is the executives who listed all the drivers, they never once said they were involved in driving innovation. But if you look at the most innovative companies globally, what you will find is the leaders, the executives, are readily involved. They spend a significant chunk of their time involved in innovation, senior level leaders. And I have to harken back to my time when I was here on campus and I was at the Manchester Executive Center, continuing ed. I led a program on quality and productivity. It was a whole institute. And we would have executives in the room and we would talk to them. This is, 20 years ago now, about the importance of quality. And the executives would be in a big executive session with their peers, and they'd say, we are committed to quality. And then they'd go back and they'd have their quality center or their quality department, and that team would do it. And it wouldn't work. What we would tell executives back then is, you know what, if you want a quality initiative to truly deeply root within your organization for the long term, you can't just commit to it. You have got to be involved in it as well. I mean, we're talking roll up your sleeves, we're talking get out of your comfort zone and into your uncomfortable place and do it with them. And that's what we've discovered. Example after example after example. I mean, this is a guy who drives innovation. Every one of their brands is an innovative brand. Here we've got a woman who said, you know what, we're in this business that is contributing to an obesity issue globally. She is so involved in it that she hired a researcher from Mayo Clinic and said, we've got to figure out a way. At Pepsi, we have to figure out a way to get salt, to get sugar, and to get fats out of our products so that we can at least minimize what we're doing to contribute to this obesity issue. She is involved in it. We've got this guy, and Kevin's going to share Ratan Tata's story. Here is a third-generation leader of a dynasty in India who didn't just say, go forth, great engineers, and design me a car. He rolled up his sleeves. He drew images. He sat on mules that he knew would not work. He was involved. Here we've got Jim Goodnight, the founder of SAS Institute, probably the most successful privately held the most successful privately held company in the world today. They develop software that data mines for most of the Fortune 500 companies. And he will tell you to this very day, his favorite thing to do is to work on coding. His favorite thing to do is to be with a group of young kids who are designing software. That's what he loves. He's in it with them. And if it's not him, this is the poster child for being involved in innovation. And this is where we started with the founder, Chairman Emeritus of Southwest Airlines. I don't think beyond Ratan Tata, we met with him, and Herb Kelleher is the likes of Ratan Tata, and those two people are leaders who are involved in every aspect of their business. They go out into the bowels of the organization, and they connect, and they engage, and they ask, and they listen. And they don't just ask, and they don't just listen. They care. They're in it. And they look at you and they engage with you like you are a bright mind that offers insight and opportunity and investment and talent and treasures and time into their projects and into their business. So together, we're all the better. That's what we've seen in terms of what drives innovation. What drives innovation is people who are involved, not just at the senior level, but in the middle and at the bottom as well, in all places. And then you come together and you rally. And multi-generational workforces benefit from this concept, reverse mentoring. I did a series of events for Lockheed. And one of the things that they are deeply committed to is creating reverse mentoring programs where, you know, the boomer generation is connected to the millennials. Because let me tell you, those boomers, they are seasoned, they are experienced, they are all knowledgeable, and they have arrived. And the millennials are seasoned and experienced, and they have arrived in their own place in their world. And when you come together and you collaborate, watch out, because therein lies the power and the opportunity to innovate.
Innovation really does feed on multiple points of view. So one of the things, back to, you know, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, is, you know, I want to know, how many lunatics have you surrounded yourself with? I mean, really, think about it. Think about the most innovative cities in the world. They're cultural kaleidoscopes, you know? Mumbai, Sao Paulo, LA, New York, London, Paris, right? They're magnets for weirdos. But they're also the places where fashion trends emerge. They're also the places where great plays and artists and books and writers emerge. They're also the places where technology emerges, right? Why? Because they're these magnets that tolerate eccentricity. Question: does everybody in your department look like you? Does everybody on your company's board of directors look like you? Or have you really shaken it up? I think that's important.
So next question. In a world of rapid change, how can a leader motivate younger, eager, innovative technical engineers and scientists when they are being negatively influenced by older, unmotivated mentors with an unaffordable level of complacency? It's out there.
I'm going to skip through a few slides here for sake of time and just cut right to the chase of the story that I want to share with you here. How many of you have traveled to India? Can I see a show of hands? It's maybe a fifth of you. If you travel to India, one of the things that you will find is that it's a heck of a lot easier to travel to India than it is to travel inside of India. Because traveling in India is absolutely not for the faint at heart. Jackie and I took a ride from New Delhi out to Pantnagar, which is in the foothills of the Himalayas, to visit an automobile manufacturing facility. And Jackie's father was killed many years ago in an automobile accident, so she's got a little, her nerves are a little raw in that respect. And she will tell you that on the way, 6-hour trip, you can only get there by car. On the way out to Pantnagar, we had 472 near-death experiences because they have rules in India, it's just nobody follows them. If you travel in India, you'll see this in many third world countries. One of the sights that you will see is this: families of 4, 5, and 6 riding on the same motorcycle, same motor scooter, no leathers, no helmets, no protection, no anything. And I kid you not, this is the way it's done. Infant kind of hanging off the back, and they're very comfortable with this. And this is what they do because this is what they can afford to do, right? If you want to get into the city where there's education and health and opportunity, you travel this way. Jackie mentioned Ratan Tata. Ratan chairs the Tata Group, 93 operating companies, $75 billion. One of their flagship companies is Tata Motors. Now, Ratan grew up in sort of a silver spoon environment and has witnessed this form of travel most of his life. But one night he was leaving a business meeting during the monsoons in Bangalore. And the monsoons in India isn't like just a rainy time. It's like in the monsoons, right, your car can slide off the road because that's how the flooding happens in India. He said to his driver, he said, "Please be careful, it's going to be very slippery tonight." And they got out into traffic and they witnessed some version of this. And again he said to his driver, he said, "Please be careful, they could slip." They went through an intersection, around a bend, and the bike indeed went down. Mom went one way, Dad went another. There were bodies all over the place. He said it was all we could do to get the car stopped and not run over this small family. He said it was an epiphany for me at the time. He said, because when I get bored in board meetings, I doodle a lot. And he said, isn't that true of all creative people? He said, I had been doodling on a small car project. I was asking the question of myself, what would happen if we could take that family off the motorcycle, put them in a safe, affordable form of transportation for just a fraction more of cost than what it costs to buy a new one of these? Well, after the Bangalore incident, he resolved to say, we're going to do this. He went to the moped and motorcycle manufacturers and the other auto manufacturers in India, and he said, this is an Indian problem. Let's solve this together in a coalition as Indians. What do you think happened? What do you think people said? Ratan, you're one of the great patriarchs of our country. We love you, but it ain't going to work. You can't do it. He said, okay, we're going to do it on our own. They started to pursue it. He went to the largest auto convention in the world, the Geneva Auto Convention, and a Financial Times reporter from London got a hold of him and said, Mr. Tata, I understand you're working on a small car project. He said, yeah, we are. We're really excited about it. He said, well, tell me about it. And he basically told the story that I just told you. The reporter said, well, what's it going to cost? He said, I'm not prepared to tell you that. We're just in the embryonic stages of design. We don't know what materials costs are going to be. I can't speak to that. And the reporter pushed, right? And he said, well, would 1 lakh rupees be about right? 1 lakh rupees at the time was $2,300 US. He said, yeah, that's the zone we want to play in. I mean, that's kind of the target space for the bottom of the pyramid that we're looking for, but I'm not prepared to make a statement. Next morning in the Financial Times, the headline read, taught us to produce one-lock car. And Rattan said, I had a choice at that point. I could go back and correct the headline, or I could put a stake in the ground and take that as our charge. He said, the biggest challenge I had was going back to our senior engineers, the experts in our company, and convincing them that we could build a $2,500 car. For 2.5 years, the experts in the auto industry and Tata Motors shook their head at the chairman and said, yep, we're working on it. For 2.5 years, those senior engineers drug their feet. And because he was so passionate about this, he finally said, look, you guys have had a shot at it. This is a problem that we must solve. If we solve it, we will do something that matters. He took a 27-year-old engineer who had proved himself and put him in charge of the team. The average age of the engineers that produced this car was 26 years of age. Jackie and I were in Mumbai a couple of years ago for the launch of this product, and I want to share just a quick video with you of how it transpired.
It's said that behind every great answer lies a greater question. And more often than not, that question starts with can you? Can you is a challenge, not just to yourself, but to all that has been labeled impossible. Can you incites you to rebel against logic, against the norm, against all odds. Can you is a journey of exploring possibilities, of discovering solutions. Can you sees the extra in every ordinary, the reality in every dream, and its many can yous that has brought the world to where it is today. It was to the question, can you see in the dark, that Edison answered with a light bulb. Can you be on top of the world, was the question that conquered Everest. And can you go beyond, put a man on the moon? Can you be stubborn enough to win, got us our freedom? Can you roam the world, but still be connected? Was the birth of a cell phone. Can you work at the speed of your thoughts? Gave us the computer. Can you make the world hum your song? Put India in the limelight. Even the nano dream started with can you? Can you imagine a car just 3 meters long, seating a family in absolute comfort? Can you have the smallest 4-door car as safe as the big ones? Can you have a car that delivers fuel efficiency bordering that of a 2-wheeler? Can you imagine a car that impacts the environment the least? Can you imagine a car that breaks all class barriers? And can you imagine a car that will change the world? Again. And to all these can-yous, we just have one thing to say. Now, you can.
Let me tell you what attracted us to this story. This is a story about making a profit while making a difference. In India alone, you have 100,000 fatalities, auto-related fatalities each year, country of, billion people. Most of those are on two-wheelers. If he can put a dent in just 5% of that market, and then extrapolate that to Brazil, to South Africa, to Russia, to Malaysia, and to other developing countries around the world, think of the impact that they will have. Now, what's interesting about this is when he put the one lakh price tag in the ground and committed to it, the global economy tanked and materials costs went up 40%. Wouldn't you think that would give him an excuse to say, all bets are off? I mean, we just didn't know. Instead, what he said was, we are going to use these constraints, we are going to use these limitations as a springboard to deeper, broader creativity. We are going to use these limitations to a higher level of innovation. Think about that concept. How often do we go to the water cooler, go to the bar, go to lunch with people and bitch and moan and whine about the regulatory, geographical, economic, human resource constraints that we have in our workplaces? What if we took those constraints, instead of whining about them, and took them as a badge of honor and said, we are going to let these constraints enhance our creativity. We're going to innovate inside these constraints. And as we do, we're going to make it harder for our competitors to stay up with us. That's the real story of what happened here.
We tried. We didn't get through all of your questions. We tried. We barely scratched the surface. There's a few more left. But what we do want to do is be sensitive to your time. We have one final, very short video that will end this session. Thank you for all the attention, for the interest. At the end of the day, however, Kevin and I believe it truly is up to you. We are at the University of San Diego. This campus has been honored and celebrated as a change maker campus. That means that the people that walk and learn on this campus constantly say, why? What if? Why not? If each and every one of you walked into your corner of the world at 9:30 today and you said, what if? Why? Why can't I inspire a movement by doing one little thing? We truly believe that movements do start with one simple behavior.
सर आपके लिए उस पार कार का इंतजाम किया है सर। सर आइए सर प्लीज। ए चल चल जाओ बोला क्या बात करता है क्या ऊपर से जाएगा क्या ऊपर से जा जा
गया मेन शो।
I hate this country. कुछ करो ना।
अब मैं वहां जाके क्या उखाड़ लूंगा?
कैसी जाने बूंदे आई जाने कैसा दर्द लाई सामने क्या है ये तेरे क्यों रुका है तू बता रे हो कौन तुझको पार लेगा कौन होगा वो मसीहा जिसे तू ढूंढता है वो ही है तू वही है तुझ में तेरा रास्ता है तुझ में तेरा है सहारा तू ही तुझको पार लेगा तू ही है तेरा किनारा रास्ता है तुझ में तेरा है सहारा तू ही तुझको पार लेगा तू ही है तेरा किनारा जिसे ढूंढता है तू ही रे तेरा मसीहा हो
So, innovation requires us to engage. Innovation requires us to collaborate. Innovation is multi-generational. Just do it. Just do it. Thank you for listening.